Today I'm talking with Jessica Jamison, and she is with Creating Core Connections, and she is a licensed counselor. You can do the longer version of that. What is that?
Licensed professional clinical counselor, so an LPCC.
There we go. There's your title. So tell me a little bit about you, Jessica, and what made you want to get into counseling?
So kind of like the typical story with, I feel like a lot of therapists is they talk about maybe personal experiences they've had with their own mental health, and it kind of prompts them into wanting to kind of support humans and not having to go through the experience they went through too. And then I worked in public education before I went back to school for therapy, and I noticed myself really more so wanting to support the students in some of their social, emotional, mental health things instead of teaching content. So it kind of led me on my path going back to school to get that license to counsel.
Yeah, so went back to school. And when did you start counseling?
So the evolution of a counselor, like you're a counselor in training in school and whatnot. So since about 18 or so, like you kind of get thrown into doing the counseling as like a trainee with supervisors and whatnot. So then progressing from there, graduated from university in 2020 in the midst of the pandemic, and then transitioned from, I worked in community mental health for internship and whatnot, and decided to transition to private practice. So started Creating Core Connections and whatnot in the midst of the pandemic there.
Well, and people needed therapists during the pandemic. In fact, I think it was probably a time where more people ended up going back to therapy. I know my husband and I ended up going to therapy during the pandemic because we had time to think about, we need to like start processing some of these things from our childhood a little bit more because we had the space to think about it. Yeah. Do you think that was true?
A lot of people ended up, like we went from a typical society and things going on. We had our scheduled routines day to day, and then the pandemic really changed what day to day looked like.
Right.
So people that had self-care coping strategies that didn't necessarily involve being in your house, which are majority of people, lost that in an instant. So now there's been no transition period of how do we help you engage in self-care and only be present with your brain, your house, wherever you live. And it was like people lost a lot of that, and were really struggling to try to figure out what to fill the void with.
Yeah, kind of stuck with themselves and realizing that maybe they needed some new tools. Yeah. And speaking of that, thankfully, we are now back in the world, and we can have all the tools back.
Yes, my gym came back. I was very excited.
Your gym came back. You know, for me, it's just even like going out to coffee shops and being with friends and things that I needed in that way. But share with us, let's just go down that self-care route a little bit, because it's a very buzzy word. Yeah. But it is an important thing to take care of ourselves when we break it down, right? Yeah. And so share with me a little bit about different ways that someone who maybe is having some struggles in their life that they could take care of themselves.
So that really is
the
spectrum of kind of one of the things I refer to a lot is like your wheel of wellness that breaks down the different parts of your life. And that big part, your emotional intelligence, is something that I focus on a lot with people, and getting connected with your feelings. We in our society definitely struggle with learning how to be present in the moment, and we're constantly looking at like, what's the next thing? So sometimes even in therapy, when I ask people like, what do you do that you enjoy to do? And then they're like, well, I have this time, and like sometimes when I have free time, I'm able to go on a hike or do different things. Right. And I was like, okay, that's an amazing thing. Love being outside, doing that. But what do you do when sometimes those external things are not available? A lot of times, working with people, it's how you talk to yourself in your brain. Sometimes we sit down to watch a TV show if that's something that we just kind of want to zone out for a little bit, and then our brain starts to creep in and is feeling guilty about taking that time to watch a TV show or read a book or something like that are pretty common self-care things. So then it's about connecting with like what brings you joy and what brings you excitement, and some of those little things that, like listening to music, if that's something that you really enjoy, there's no reason you can't dance around and move around your house. But sometimes we get in our brain that we're supposed to act a certain way, and we cut ourselves off from doing some of those self-care things that we enjoy. And I remind people you're allowed to customize that experience for you and your brain.
Yeah, that's amazing. And I know that's something that I've had to do for myself, because I'm very much a list maker, and I'm always trying to get things done. And I've realized I also need to even if I have to put it in the list,
Yeah.
things that bring me joy, I have to add to that list and make sure that I'm doing things that are very life-giving. And I know, like you just said, it can be different for everyone. It can be
absolutely.
going for a walk. It can be listening to music. I mean, the list goes on and on, right? And so our brains are different.
Absolutely.
And there's another kind of buzzy word around neurodivergent.
Yes.
And I mean, there are definitely people with all different kinds of brains, right?
Oh,
and
absolutely.
so we have to treat our brains differently depending on the person. So talk to me a little bit about that.
So the neurodivergent label kind of like started a lot with humans that experience more so some of that ADHD, autism, sensory processing, different things, which inherently is just an awareness of like, oh, like sometimes like loud noises, different sensory things are hard, you know what I mean, for me to be in a certain environment. So that neurodivergent label came more about with if your brain didn't work in a normal socialized way.
Okay.
So we noticed we had differences with
Yeah.
that. So then when we use the neurotypical word, that's how, based on research, science data, how your brain works optimally with no outside influences. But we live in a world where there's a lot of outside influence,
Yeah.
and your mental health is more than just your biology, genetics, and your brain.
Totally.
So
And is anyone really neurotypical?
that's the framework
where's the
I use.
pendulum, right?
So sometimes we use neurotype is the one I like to use, sometimes even a little bit more, because it's just an awareness of like, hey, your neurotype is how your brain works.
Right.
Just the more general even than the neurodivergently too. And that can include different, if you have different mental health diagnoses or things. And so how do you adjust that for you?
So what recommendations would you have for someone who does feel like maybe their brain works a little bit differently? What would you recommend to them as a starting point?
My main goal with pretty much any human that I work with is to teach them how to be present and aware in their day-to-day. And sometimes if you're overwhelmed by like an environment, if you're overwhelmed with that busy list and you look at your list and you're like, this does not look possible to complete in the day. It's about pausing and looking at those tasks and really inventorying, what do you enjoy about this? What is kind of a barrier to you really doing and engaging with this task? So there are things on your list that you dread, just kind of asking yourself how you feel about some of the stuff. We forget to do that.
I love that, being present in the day-to-day. That's so important because I think many of us do get overwhelmed. I'm speaking from my own experience.
Everybody had some category.
Even recently where it's just, sometimes it's too much, right? And so pausing and being present and saying, okay, you know, what am I actually capable of? What am I able to, you know, take off my list? And like you said, what on this list does bring me joy? What can I do to like kind of bring some peace back to my day?
And giving yourself permission to modify those things in a way that works for you. We sometimes get really caught up in, especially social media, like what are other people doing? What's the normal thing to do? Like what am I supposed to do in this scenario? And aside from humans being safe and well in their brain and present and whatnot, you really can modify a lot of things for how it soothes your soul and brings you that joy.
That's great. So if someone's watching and they have, this has spoke to them, or they are feeling like they need to see a counselor, they want some help working on good processes for their own brain, how can they get in touch with you?
So I have a directory link on Therapy Den. So myself is on there. You can search Creating Core Connections. Even if you search my name, Jessica Jamison, it pops up there pretty close to the top too. So that's nice. There's a way to find me if you just remember my name. A lot of times too, I get people who just kind of word of mouth, like hear about me as a therapist, like doing local community things like that, because I try to be very involved in advocacy and whatnot in the community as well.
Yeah, I know you are. And can you just share, as we're wrapping up, just share like some words of inspiration for someone today who might be watching who's struggling a little bit? Maybe they are feeling off, maybe they aren't feeling connected, not present. Let's just share, you know, maybe some tips, some words of wisdom for them.
So I think the biggest thing to do is, again, that present and inventory. When you feel like things in your brain are getting to the point where you're really disconnected and not experiencing that fulfillment from some of the stuff, acknowledging that it's okay to talk about and ask for help. If I don't speak something into existence, me assuming someone might be aware that because I'm super busy, I might be stressed. We have a hard time coming outside of our own brain because we're trying to triage that. And I know from even a personal experience before I was a therapist, trying to find a therapist is one of the most overwhelming things too, because it's almost like speaking a foreign language, some of these styles and types of therapy too. So looking for therapists that do free consultations, that's one of the things like I do and work as like a community give back too.
Yeah.
Anyone who is interested in counseling or just has questions can contact me, and a lot of other therapists do this too, to kind of feel out the vibe of like, is this someone that I could talk to?
Exactly.
Do I have questions about how to get involved with this? And so finding that support person, we work really well when there's a connection point. So you can Google and search for that. A lot of people that do.
So reach out, reach out to someone. Don't do it alone.
Yeah.
And then when you're looking for a therapist, see if they offer a free consultation. That's amazing. And you were even saying earlier, and I just loved that you said this outside. You were mentioning, hey, you had someone come in, they did the free consultation. You told them, go ahead and do other consultations. And if you want to come back and even process with me how those consultations went, we can do that. And that just shows your character and how you are as a therapist. And so
it's like an example of that modification. If you're so overwhelmed with the process, you're like, I'm talking to all these therapists, like someone help me even process that. Like, what does that mean? Yeah.
Absolutely. All right. Well, thank you so much for coming in.
Thank you for having me.
Core Connections with Jessica Jamison. You can find her there. Are there any other places that we can find you?
I'm on Therapy Den. If you search Creating Core Connections, it takes you directly to a portal called like Client Secure that works through Simple Practice. It'll say one of those buzzwords on there, and you can click to email me. My email is jjamison@Creating Core Connections, and you can connect with me directly on there too.
All right, great. Thank you so much.
Perfect.
Thank you guys so much for watching here on Good Morning Akron. We had a great morning, and we've got more great stuff coming up next.